Hey everybody, welcome to the Breitbart Conversation with EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. We appreciate you being here. We just wanted to let you know that our event with Vice President Vance is going to be on November 20th. We hope some of you guys can make it out to that as well. Before we bring out the Administrator, we want to thank our exclusive sponsor, American Chemistry Council. We are going to be having a great conversation with their CEO, Chris John, after this. And we want to thank our partners, CGCN, Alpha Institute. And if the Administrator is ready, I'd like to bring up Breitbart's Washington Bureau Chief, Matt Boyle, and the EPA Administrator, Lee Zeldin.
Have a good show. Here we go. All righty. Yes. Mr. Administrator, thank you for taking the time to do this with us. Exciting times. So where I would start this conversation is last night we saw the first step in the United States Senate towards ending this nonsensical government shutdown that the Democrats created. I've never in my 15 years of doing this seen the Democrats cave as bad as they did last night. Your thoughts on as the steps are beginning here to reopen the government?
I mean, let's get the government open and functioning. You ask the average American what they want from their federal government, and like one of the very basics is they just want to see it function. Like at the very least, the lowest possible standards and expectations is that at the very least there would be an ability for these agencies to operate, for federal employees to get paid. At EPA, we operate off of a lot of carryover funding. It was about 3 weeks ago today. We had a big furlough kick in of about 4,000, but most of the agency was still working. But this current pay period, which would end November 21st, if this shutdown this week, this new deal for some reason fell through, then we would have a very drastic escalation on November 21st and major impacts to what the agency provides across the entire country. And a lot of Americans care about clean air, land, water, Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, TSCA, CERCLA, RCRA. There's all these federal statutes on the books that give requirements to EPA, and we need people in the office. Now, fortunately, everyone who's been in the office has been getting paid, and it's been a little bit of a different situation. But I'll tell you, as somebody who just got done with a swing that ended with a delayed flight back to D.C., and about to head back out, going to West Virginia here over the course of the next 36 hours, and Kansas right behind it. I can't even imagine the impacts to average Americans across this country with regards to travel. And I think that the Democrats are picking, you could say there's no better time than now. You could have said it every day over the course of the last 40 plus days to end it. Just vote for a clean CR, get the government back open. There's no point in delaying any further. They knew that there was a lot of pain and suffering that was resulting to American families, and that was going to continue to increase. So I'm grateful to see that Congress is hopefully going to be passing a CR this week. It would have been better if it got done 40 days ago, but at least it's getting done now.
So can you explain for us how that works, like at the EPA versus the rest of the government? So like the workers that weren't furloughed, that were working during the shutdown were still getting paid throughout the whole thing. How is that different than the other agencies and departments?
EPA operates off of a lot of carryover funding, multi-year funding. So when we woke up on October 1st, it's not like our agency shut down because there wasn't a government funding deal by September 30th. When we woke up on October 1st, we were basically 100%, pretty close to it. Mm-hmm. And now most of us are still in the agency, although the carryover funding every day that goes by is becoming less and less. But there are a lot of different carryover pots of money that pay for our staff.
Okay, so now I know you've been touring the country. You've been to places like Oregon, Nevada, et cetera, over the course of the shutdown, figuring out what the impacts of it are on EPA and its operations, as well as, kind of highlighting, I think, that, the fact that the Democrats continued to vote to keep the government shut down until last night when they finally, 8 of them joined the Republicans in the Senate to begin the process of reopening. Can you tell us what you found when you were out there touring the country? What were some of the impacts of this?
So fortunately, I've been able to spend a lot of time outside of D.C. During this year since I was confirmed as administrator earlier this year. I've been to 48 states. By Thursday, we'll have been to all 50 states, plus Canada and Mexico. Although when I was in Nevada, there was a very friendly Canadian who took my joke well when I told her that by the middle of November, I will have been to all 51 states plus Mexico. She was a good sport with the joke. I was in Toronto last week for G7, and it was Game 5 and Game 6. They were really into their Blue Jays, and I know that Breitbart has no shortage of Dodgers fans, and I will say though in Toronto, and they were into their Blue Jays. I went to Vegas from there for a couple of things, including happening to be there during Game 7. And but for the energy and environment ministers, we all came together inside of Toronto, and there's really interesting policy conversations to be had as far as our own domestic policies and regulations and laws, and also where the rest of the world is going. While we gather here down in Brazil, there's this UN global meeting of a whole bunch of different countries to talk about climate change and what kind of standards they're going to hold themselves to. I would say right here in the United States, I've had a chance to see firsthand, meeting so many different companies, industries, communities. We hold ourselves to really high standards of environmental stewardship. We're leaning into innovation in America. We're tapping into our own energy resources so much safer, better for our environment than so many other countries around the world. I was just speaking to your sponsor here before we came on stage about a visit that I had inside of Texas where they're doing advanced recycling, and I thought it was so amazing, this operation that ExxonMobil's doing, where they're breaking plastic down to raw material. And there's just so much exciting opportunity across this country. I've been in just the last few weeks, groundbreaking of a $4 billion data center project in West Memphis, Arkansas, a nuclear project that just broke ground in Idaho Falls, Idaho, a new data center in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I took a trip about an hour out of Cheyenne, and there's a brand new mining operation that was 2 weeks old. I'm recording a video here in about an hour that we're sending to, because the Arizona Chamber is doing an event. They're celebrating a $5.3 billion natural gas expansion of Transwestern to deliver natural gas from the Permian Basin into Arizona. There's so much exciting projects all across the entire country. Natural gas being proposed to transport along the Trans-Alaska Pipeline in Alaska. Enbridge has a pipeline through the Great Lakes. Williams Pipeline, Williams Company has been advocating for Nessie Pipeline and Constitution Pipeline to deliver natural gas into New York and New England. There's so much that we're doing across this country that if you sit here inside of an office in DC and you're talking about regulations and you don't have that firsthand perspective, then I don't think I would be as well prepared to be able to have those conversations. But it's very multidimensional, not just being able to visit one company that one aspect of a rule impacts, but to visit a bunch of different companies across a bunch of different industries impacted by many different aspects of regulations. When we're making decisions on where to go next, our agency, and myself included, we're very well prepared.
Yeah, so I want to get into deregulation and all that stuff too, and also the speeding up of the approvals of stuff, because I think that's really important. But I also want to, I watched an interview you did this weekend where you were talking about the impact that the shutdown and the Democrats had with their shutdown on keeping our water, air, land clean, right? Like, and you were saying, you know what, you don't want to hear that Democrats actually care about clean air or clean water or clean land anymore, because by doing this record-long shutdown, they really hurt those efforts. Can you talk to us about that?
November 21st, that next round of furloughs, if it was to have to kick in, you're talking about an Office of Air and Radiation that would be operating at less than 15%. There would be an over 70% furlough kicked in at the Office of Enforcement and Compliance, over 50% of the Office of Land and Emergency Management. It's Superfund, that's Brownfield, that's emergency response. You'd have an over 60% furlough kick in the Office of Water. That's a Safe Drinking Water Act. When I said the Office of Air and Radiation, that's Clean Air Act. That's air pollution. And I've spent 8 years in the House, and there's so many funding fights that would take place where I would constantly hear members who are now voting no to a clean CR, then saying that if you vote no for a clean CR, that you're fill in the blank with all sorts of very hyperbolic rhetoric, and it's the shoe's on the other foot right now, and it's like hypocrisy knows no bounds. Forgetting your words and positions of not that long ago. I mean, I had an opportunity to be in the House when there was a Republican president and Democratic president. I've been there with Republican Congresses and Democratic Congresses and basically every mixture over the course of those 8 years. And like governing, it's not easy. I mean, I've voted against certain appropriations bills or debt limit bills at certain times. I have very strong beliefs on important funding issues, but I mean, we've never seen anything like this. It's the longest shutdown in the history of this country, and it's the longest shutdown since President Trump's first term, when congressional Democrats did the same exact thing. And I was there during the first 2 years of President Biden, and the government wasn't shut down like this. Like, yeah, we disagree. I mean, in those first 2 years, Democrats controlled Congress, but, Senate, just like right now, you have a Republican president, you have a Republican House, you have a Republican Senate, but in the Senate, it requires 60 votes. They didn't have 60 votes during President Biden's first term, but, and the government was kept open. Not like the impacts are drastic, and I think the most outrageous comment that we've heard, and there was a few that could get nominated, was Congresswoman Clark talking about how she understands all the pain and suffering that the shutdown is causing for American families, but that is the leverage point. That needs to be used in order to accumulate power. It is a calculation hoping for that pain and suffering to become a leverage point. Like, nobody should be in office if they even think that to themselves personally, that they are going to rely on causing pain on their constituents in order to gain more power. And here you have someone who not only feels it privately, but actually bragging about it publicly, a person in leadership, like the number 2, right, of House Democrats, talking about how they want this pain and suffering for American families as a leverage point. This is a tool that needs to be used right now in order to help gain power. And I think that, as far as the news cycle goes, I remember when the news cycle became 24 hours, it was like, whoa, that's, things are moving so fast. And then all of a sudden the news cycle became 7 hours. Like, okay, this is going so fast. Like, while we're here having this conversation, I'm sure that like on social media, the news cycle is flipping like 7 more times and, in 7 different directions, because things are just so fast.
I think the president's meeting with a foreign leader right now while we're talking, right?
Yeah,
like, and so
there's so much that is happening, and I really think it's important for the American public to take inventory of their elected official and figure out where their elected official is right now in this moment. And I, again, it's one thing to privately be thinking the wrong thought, the wrong principle, the wrong value to yourself. It's a whole other thing to be pounding your chest and saying it out loud and saying this is your strategy, because if they're showing you their true colors right now in this moment, they'll do it again in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I don't want to get too political with you, but there's a huge component of everything that we're seeing with the shutdown that has a New York side of it, right? Like, obviously, both leaders in the House and Senate for the Democrats are from New York, right? You've got Chuck Schumer, you've got Hakeem Jeffries, and then obviously also this all happens on the backdrop of the now electoral victory of Zohran Mamdani. Of course, you ran for governor in New York. You were a congressman, as you mentioned, from New York for some time. Can you tell us about that, what we're seeing in the Democrat Party as it exists right now, and your thoughts on New York emerging as a major, major flashpoint in this?
Matt, you and I were very close with Charlie Kirk, and what we witnessed on September 10th was something that should never happen anywhere in this country. Like, this is a thought of like maybe some third world country somewhere else where somebody would be encouraging disagreement and debate, fighting to protect First Amendment freedom of speech. And because your argument is winning, or because you're creating this setting where you can have that open disagreement and debate, for somebody to be shot and killed, assassinated for it. I still, as we gather here today, having this conversation on what is the 2-month anniversary of Charlie getting assassinated, and it's almost 2 months to the minute here
Seems like yesterday.
While we're sitting, and Matt, you and I were in touch as it was happening. I then see Jay Jones, who is now the Attorney General-elect of Virginia, getting outed for these text messages talking about killing political opponents. You have a choice made by the Democratic Party in New York City to nominate Mamdani. They didn't have to. There were plenty of other choices. They chose to nominate this guy. And right now we're seeing with the shutdown, like all the backlash that Senator Schumer is getting. Why did he support the shutdown in the first place? Was to feed the far left of his party, because he didn't have the courage, the will to lead the far left. He was being led by it. Senate Democrats were being led by it. But here's the problem. You then shut the government down, and you're creating a heightened expectation that you are going to have an end result that you are never going to get. And Senator Schumer's smart enough to know that he was never going to be able to deliver on the expectations that he and his colleagues set for their own base. So now the government opens, you have a record-long shutdown, and the left isn't saying, hey, great job, Senator Schumer. They're actually flipping out, like saying you need to go. And it's because of expectations that Senator Schumer created. And by the way, the right can be guilty of the same exact thing. When we're in charge, like, you need to set expectations accurately and communicate with your own base so that they know what the play is. Because if there's a shutdown that someday in the past or the future that was caused by Republicans, they might be cheering you on for a minute that you caused the shutdown. But if you're not going to meet that objective, you'll be in a worse place than if you didn't start the fight to begin with. So in this moment, what's so important for leaders of the Democratic Party to do is to just speak out about what you value, what your principles are, what your ethics are, what your morals are, what you believe to be right. Now, by the way, if they're wrong in the first place, then I can't help you. But for anyone who is a leader of the Democratic Party, they need to start challenging that activist base of their party, because they're feeding it right now, and they're letting it take over and consume their party. And it's a dangerous road to go down right now. And you're seeing it end up playing out where Jay Jones, despite it being outed, that he wants to see his political opponents shot and killed. Like, this isn't anything where, like, hey, there's a rumor. There was some story based on some anonymous source that said that one day there was this party 30 years ago where No. This is something that Jay Jones said not that long ago. And the Democrats chose to double down and support this guy, even though he said it right after Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And Mamdani gets nominated, and now he's elected. Now he's the next mayor of New York City. And I'm from New York, as you pointed out, Matt. Born and raised. And I'm scared for this city that is not going to go in the right direction. They have economic issues that are going to get worse. They have budgeting, fiscal issues that are going to get worse. They have public safety issues that unfortunately are going to go in the wrong direction. And residents and businesses are going to flee. And they're saying, why don't you tax the wealthy? I saw this play out with de Blasio. When de Blasio got elected in 2013, he said, let's increase taxes on the wealthy and let's have universal childhood pre-K. Now, I saw what was going to happen next from a mile away. It's 2014, and Andrew Cuomo was running for his first re-election in 2014. He ends up contacting de Blasio. Hey, great news. We have your money for universal childhood pre-K. De Blasio's response to Cuomo was, that's not good enough. I want my tax increase. So what was very revealing is that this push for increasing taxes on the wealthy was because the election in 2013, de Blasio got elected tapping into the resentment that people have towards success. And there's this contrast between conservatives and liberals right now on all of these different policies that are so stark. And when you actually get elected and you're in this position and you start daring New Yorkers to flee, telling billionaires you are no longer welcome. You think the billionaires maybe can afford a flight to Florida? They probably, many of them have taken it already. The few who are left and their businesses, they're going to go and not look back. The consequences of these policies are dire. And New York City is going to just have to try to survive the next 4 years of this guy. And who knows, is with New York City voters, maybe they'll choose to reelect him despite New York City heading in the wrong direction. But that's up to New York City to figure out. And I do feel bad for the voters who tried to stop it. I feel bad for the New Yorkers who have already left. But as I pointed out during that interview that I did yesterday, I don't feel bad for the people who voted for it. And I don't feel bad for anyone who stayed on the sidelines.
Yeah, so Mr. Administrator, the buzzword, if you will, for the around Mamdani was affordability. He tapped into a thing about a sentiment in the public about affordability. Arguably, there are a lot of people out there across America who are worried about prices and inflation and so on and so forth. Now, you guys, the difference I'd argue is that the policies that the Trump administration is pursuing, that Republicans are pursuing, are actually addressing this stuff, but rather than just the buzzy words that you see and false promises like you see from the hard left and the socialist left. Can you walk us through, and that kind of brings us to the bigger picture of why we're talking here today about things like deregulation, like the efforts that you guys are doing at the EPA. Can you walk us through the broader deregulation agenda that you guys have pursued at the EPA and how that connects into bringing prices down for consumers? Because I think we're seeing that in the numbers and the data out there. So walk us through what you guys have done, what's on the horizon, and how that fits into the bigger picture.
Yeah. Well, first, I want to say something about the affordability point that you brought up. And you could pose a question for someone who's actually in office. So now he's the mayor-elect of New York City. Is it better or worse for New York City if 30 billionaires in New York City are living and working in New York City and spending their money in New York City and paying their taxes in New York City? Or is it better for New York City if those 30 billionaires choose to go down to Florida or Texas and live there, work there, pay their taxes there? Like, that would be a question for the mayor-elect. Like, what is better for you? You have to put a budget together. What do you think is better? Because right now you're daring them to leave. What is better as far as affordability and quality of life? Inside of all these different apartment complexes where the person who owns the building, multi-generational, like they have the land, but there are a whole lot of people who own buildings inside of New York City who are choosing whether or not to upgrade units when people vacate. Like, you could go through the individual impacts of all these different policies and present these questions. It's not a question for a pollster. Dude, you won, okay? So you're the mayor-elect. Now you have to actually govern the city. And now you have to answer not what's best as far as rhetoric. It's not about what your next election is. It's not about your pollster saying or any of your other consultants. You have to become the mayor of New York City right now. What is best for New York City? You start posing all these different questions. They contradict so many of the policies you put out. Now, as far as us at EPA, we will, in 1 year, do more deregulation than entire federal governments in the past have done across all federal agencies, across entire presidencies. One agency, 1 year, more deregulation than you have ever seen across entire governments, every agency, entire presidencies. Now, we're proud of that because we inherited a big mess, especially decisions made in 2023 and 2024 by the Biden EPA that we inherited and we're fixing. We want to fix everything, large, small. No one is doing us any favors by holding back any ideas or any asks. We want to know everything that we can do, large and small. We want to do it all at the same exact time. You're going to have a conversation here in a bit with Aaron Szabo. Aaron is the Assistant Administrator for the Office of Air and Radiation. I sat with our Office of Air and Radiation team in February, just a few weeks after I came in. And I would say maybe it's half of the president's deregulatory agenda may just be inside of that one office at EPA. And I thought maybe the team was going to be telling us that we were going to do, these few things for a few months, then we'll start these next few things, and then eventually by the end of year 4, we will have accomplished 70% of our agenda, and that is a huge accomplishment. The answer they ended up getting is we're going to do everything at once. The team that we have put together inside of our program offices, inside of our regions, the political leadership to come work as part of the Trump administration at EPA, we are so locked in and motivated to fix everything and to do it at once. We want to know what we can do to fight for the American public. One proposal in particular, the 2009 Obama EPA endangerment findings, the proposed rescission, if finalized, is the largest act of deregulation in the history of the United States of America. It's a proposed rescission of the endangerment finding, all the greenhouse gas emissions for light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles that followed, and more, like those annoying off-cycle credits, the annoying start-stop feature in the vehicles where your car, every time you go to a stop sign or a red light, your car shuts down. And that's by the way, besides the point. But it is going to be, if finalized, the largest act of deregulation in the history of the United States of America. And we are going to follow the plain language of the law. We are going to, we have read, we are going to respect the Supreme Court decisions that have come out on Sackett for Waters of the United States, which we're revising right now, on Loper-Bright, which overturned the Chevron doctrine, West Virginia versus EPA, Michigan versus EPA, cases that talk about the major policies doctrine. If an agency like EPA is going to have regulations into the hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars, maybe that should be a debate in Congress. Maybe they should have a vote. Maybe they should decide instead of unelected bureaucrats at some federal agency doing all of that because Congress didn't have the will, so they punted to their friends over at some agency to grab power themselves with some creative interpretation of law. I read through the Obama endangerment finding from 2009, and all through it, I find these examples where it talks about how Section 202 of the Clean Air Act doesn't say we can't, so therefore I guess we can. Well, the Supreme Court in Loper-Bright, in overturning the Chevron doctrine, says that cannot happen anymore. We will follow the plain language of the law. Section 202 of the Clean Air Act doesn't say to regulate carbon dioxide. It doesn't say methane. It doesn't reference the greenhouse gases. It doesn't talk about combating global climate change. And it certainly doesn't talk about mental leaps, where they say carbon dioxide, when mixed with a bunch of other well-mixed gases, some not even emitted from light, medium, and heavy-duty vehicles, in order to combat global climate change, well, then that causes an endangerment to public health and welfare inside of the United States when the agency had always been looking at local and regional impacts. For those in this room, this is a smart room, you're familiar with Section 2 of the Clean Air Act, and you're familiar with how EPA is operated, you probably just counted about 5 different mental leaps. So we're going to follow the plain language of the law. And if you want the federal government to be regulating the heck out of greenhouse gas emissions, it's very easy. Go right down the road to the United States Congress. You go contact your House member, you go contact your senator, and you ask for them to amend Section 202 of the Clean Air Act, and they put it in law, and then we follow the law. We're going to follow our statutory obligations. It's a wild concept that's upsetting a lot of people, but we're not going to be apologetic about it. We're proudly fulfilling this agenda. That is the Trump mandate.
So I'm glad you brought up the endangerment finding, because I don't know, you probably can see all the way over here.
It's the only word I can read on your.
I have endangerment finding in giant letters here. So can you explain for us, first off, you did a pretty good job there explaining what the endangerment finding is. What is the timeline here, do you think, of when or if this is revoked?
So the proposal has been out. Public comment period is over. We are reviewing the public comments that were submitted now, and then we are going to be reaching a final decision immediately.
Okay, so now, Mr. Administrator, another big thing that that I think you found when you were confirmed by the Senate and you took over the position is that, from what I understand, the EPA also approves the use of a variety of different chemicals, and chemicals go into everything that we build and make and all sorts of different stuff. And I think there were hundreds of them in the backlog. Can you explain for us, first off, what is the EPA's role in doing this, and then also where things were when you got there and what you're doing to rectify this?
Well, I guess if you ask the average American, what does the EPA do? They would think for a second, okay, EPA stands for Environmental Protection Agency. Their guess would be that the agency has something to do with protecting the environment. You're right. But that's not all we do. And as I referenced earlier, we have the Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, TSCA, CERCLA, RCRA, and more. And Congress, some of these laws are landmark laws that have been around for half a century. There's some talk about modernizing some of these laws. That could be significant. The conversation about permitting reform in Congress might involve a modernization of some of these laws. What the agency was failing to do when we came in is that there's all sorts of statutory obligations that we were blowing past deadlines, that we were that there was accumulating massive backlogs. New chemical backlog, 500. The pesticide review backlog, 14,000. Small refinery exemptions, 175. The Biden administration didn't approve one. There was hundreds backlogged in the state implementation plans, blown deadline for renewable volume obligations. The list goes on. Inside the chemicals office, we did two things to get through the backlog. Aside from just making a priority fulfilling our statutory obligations, we have added scientists to the office, so plussed up the bandwidth of the office to be able to get through the backlog. And two, from an earlier continuing resolution in March, we had $17 million that came into the agency to update our IT infrastructure because the system would go down for days, and that would impact the ability to be able to process these applications. I came in and I said, okay, all of these backlogs that we inherited, I want us to get through everything as quickly as we possibly can because it is our statutory obligation. We cannot prioritize pet partisan ideological projects over statutory obligations. And by prioritizing that, we'll actually get more done with less. We came in, the agency was over 16,000. By the end of this year, our agency will be around 12,500. We'll save about $750 million a year in that staffing efficiency. On top of the over $20 million so far, real estate consolidations, the $29 billion of canceled grants, $29 billion of canceled grants. That's almost 3 times the size of our annual operating budget. Canceled media contracts, the subscriptions, that was $1 million. Canceled an EPA museum that maybe none of you had visited, none of you had even heard about. Well, it costs $4 million to build, $600,000 a year to operate. We're trying to save money wherever we possibly can. And with our staff size at 12,500 employees, we will get more done than when our agency had over 16,000. How is that possible? Really easy. Just focusing on core statutory obligations, getting our work done as required by Congress.
So can you also explain, and here's this affordability issue again, how the EPA's work affects energy prices, and how do we bring energy prices down for the average American consumer? Because I know that they're constantly thinking about this, whether they're heating their homes this winter, whether they're putting gas in their cars and trucks. How do we bring the energy prices down?
EPA has the power to slow things down. EPA has the power to speed things up. And we work with other agencies with their own equities, with their own jurisdiction, and we work together. They see the Trump administration, the president put together a cabinet where we get along. There's great chemistry. We support each other's efforts. Our staffs work closely together. There's no friction. There's no issues that have us competing against each other. I want to see all the other cabinet members as successful as possible in their teams to succeed. So the president creates a National Energy Dominance Council chaired by Secretary Burgum, the Secretary of Interior, the vice chairs, Secretary Wright from the Department of Energy, Howard Lutnick, the Secretary of Commerce, is on there. And when you think about getting a new gas pipeline, as we spoke about earlier, we referenced Constitution, Nessie, Enbridge's project, Transwestern's expansion, the LNG conversation for Alaska, and that list goes on. I've referenced the new data centers that are getting built, the new nuclear site in Idaho Falls, and Oklo, which is doing that project in Idaho Falls, is talking about getting a bunch of other ones done right behind it. All these projects where ground is being broken right now, rare earth being brought out of our ground, moving the supply chain from China to the United States, not just to tap into these resources that we have under us, but also boosting the entire supply chain so that we don't pull the resource out of the ground and have to send it over, to China or somewhere else out of our country to bring it back regardless, boosting the entire supply chain here. EPA has the ability to help all these other agencies in working closely. We don't just say, if the Department of Interior calls, well, I'm sorry, that's not in our jurisdiction. And vice versa. Like we will work together beyond what might have been the most narrow interpretation of what the agency is responsible. We will work with White House Council on Environmental Quality with the Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Stephen Miller's shop. And we will, as a team, meet with President Trump often. I had a meeting with him recently where the president will ask about all sorts of very specific projects that we're speaking about here. I had a situation just recently. The president called really late at night, and he was really fired up over a very specific issue, and he wanted me to call. Lights were out. I was laying down in bed. I was ready to go to sleep. Fortunately, he didn't call like a half hour later. I was not yet asleep. He wanted me to call this other cabinet member and somebody else and then get back to him. Mr. President, just in case I'm not able to reach them right away, do you want me to just call you back in the morning? He said, whatever time it is, it's okay. I'll be up. Call the first person, answers the phone, and it's great. It's a 5-minute conversation. Great. Hopefully the next person answers as quickly, and I call the president back. And this project's over for the night. The next person does not answer. This is another member of the cabinet. And I am calling multiple times. I'm texting. I'm using different apps, different devices, different accounts. I'm trying my best to reach this person as quickly as I could. Eventually, I reached him, but it didn't happen right away. When it was over, I'm looking at the time, and I'm like, okay, he said, call him whenever. I'm going to give him a call. Call the president. He's wide awake. He is wide awake. Like, it was as if it was 2 p.m. in the afternoon, and he just had like 7 monsters. He is working. And he's talking China and India and trade policy, but also talking about this specific issue that I needed to close the loop with him on. And he is fired up and passionate about this topic. And just when you might think that it would be appropriate to use a word like emotional about it, you could tell he was smiling on his other end of the phone at this very late night where all of you hopefully were sleeping and I otherwise would have been. He said, isn't this fun? Aren't you having fun? And you could tell he was saying it because he's having fun. And I love the fact that we have a president who you can have conversations with at like 1, 2, 4 o'clock in the morning. And he is working for us. And that sets a tone and a culture inside this entire team where I at EPA am not going to say, no, I'm sorry, that's not something that the EPA does. Go call someone else. Instead, we will all work together to be able to get the Trump mandate fulfilled, to make sure that we are delivering for the American public. Proud to work for and with this president, with the Vice President, J.D. Vance. And Matt, your coverage every step of the way at Breitbart, it's been exceptional. Seeing you inside the White House press briefing room, obviously Caroline is the best of the best in answering questions, whether, wherever they're coming from. Although I would like to see, I would have liked to see Matt Boyle asking questions during the last administration. But just think, we had a president.
They wouldn't let me in.
We had a president who was waking up. And they were calling lids really early in the day. They were using auto pens. This president is engaged. Times have changed, and I'm honored to be here to do my part. And grateful to Breitbart for hosting this. You, Matt, for being a great friend, an amazing professional, and I'm excited to know you, and thank you for calling to do this.
Yeah, no, and Mr. Administrator, there's one last question I want to ask you here, and this is near and dear to our team at Breitbart. You mentioned a lot of our crew are big Dodgers fans because we have a big presence in Los Angeles. That's where our founder, Andrew Breitbart, founded Breitbart. That's where our CEO, Larry Solov, is based. Several of our other executives. I mean, we've seen one of my colleagues here who introduced us a few minutes ago, John Kahn, his house literally burned down in Los Angeles. I know you went out there. And the EPA's role in this is complete. Like, you guys did it in record time in terms of the cleanup and whatnot. But the fact is that they're running into all sorts of different problems in terms of trying to rebuild and everything out there. What are your thoughts on the LA fires?
Okay, first the politically correct part. What I saw was apocalyptic. Over 13,000 buildings destroyed. I saw members of the Breitbart team on the street, in the Palisades, in front of what used to be their homes. And I was honored to be there right after confirmation to do my part, have our agency do our part, to get our work done in record time. This happened in the middle of January. The president was sworn in a few days later. He signed an executive order. He wanted EPA to finish our phase 1 hazardous material removal in 30 days so that Army Corps can come in and do their phase 2 debris removal. The initial response was that was going to be impossible. You'll be lucky if you could get this done by the summer. And we got it done in Trump speed and got it done in less than 30 days. And I want to give a big thank you and kudos to the EPA team, all those dedicated career staffers who exceptionally were busting their tails to help the good people of Los Angeles who lost everything. We completed our work in that timeline. Army Corps has since completed all of their phase 2 debris removal. So as far as the federal government goes, we completed all of our work. Now, this might be a little bit less politically correct. Karen Bass and Gavin Newsom need to get off of their asses and allow all of the people in Los Angeles to rebuild their freaking homes and their businesses. Okay, you have people who are suffering extreme amount of frustration, anger, and pain because of whatever type of bureaucratic red tape, delays, and incompetency is resulting in the local and state leadership preventing people from building what is theirs. They lost everything. They lost their homes, they lost their businesses, and now they just sit there and wait, and they don't even know when it's going to end. It is incompetency. And for these people who live there, who lost everything, the most important thing that you can give them is to instantly allow them to rebuild their lives. And you're denying them right now. This mayor and this governor out in California are denying the residents of Los Angeles the most basic need when you lose everything in a home fire, the ability to rebuild what is your dream, what is your family. Now, there are people who have decided that they're gone, they're leaving, they're never going to look back. They're done with California. But you have a whole lot of people who are in Los Angeles. When I visited the week after confirmation, I was going to people's homes where they had contractors at their property right then and there. Let's talk about the first week of February of 2025. They have contractors at their site to be able to rebuild their home and to be able to forget what just happened, leave it in the past so that they can move forward. And those people are still sitting there with contractors waiting for approvals from an incompetent mayor and an incompetent governor. And the rhetoric that we hear from Governor Newsom, where he's saying that President Trump is somehow the reason the federal government, we have completed everything. There's nothing left waiting for EPA sign off. There's nothing else waiting on us. There's nothing else waiting for Army Corps of Engineers. So I know that it's very important for everyone tuning in from Los Angeles. We have certainly heard your voice. We've heard your passion. We've heard your frustration. We've heard your anger. And we stand with you. The Trump administration, President Trump, we've heard it from him directly. We stand with all of the residents of Los Angeles who want to be able to rebuild, and they're just waiting for permission from their incompetent leadership who are denying them the right to rebuild.
Mr. Administrator, really want to thank you for joining us here. Give our best to President Trump.
Thanks, Matt.
All right. Folks, we're gonna welcome to the stage here in a second as well one of our sponsors, Chris John from the American Chemistry Council. So, Mr. Administrator, really want to thank you for joining us, and again, give our best to the President. So, thank you, sir.
Bye-bye.
Yep. And if we can get Chris up here. So. Good to see you. Thank you for this. Okay, so we get a lot to talk about here. We just talked to the EPA administrator there for quite some time, and I think there was something there in the middle that we talked about the chemicals that the EPA is approving and why they are, the big backlog that they had at the beginning of this administration, how he's working to speed that up. I want to get into all of that and why that's important, but I think let's start with like a basic explanation for people out there about how important chemicals are for literally everything. I mean, literally on a molecular level, if you're going to build stuff, you need stuff that goes into it and chemicals that go into that to do it. So can you explain that for us? Like just how important these chemical companies are? I mean, they're literally the if you will, the atomic or molecular structure that makes everything.
Yeah, you said that very well. So everything that America builds, protects, or innovates starts with chemistry. So our members are the scientists and the engineers who make all that happen. And so what that means to all of you in the audience watching online here is that, as you just said very articulately, the manufacturing supply chain starts with us. So the car that you drove to this meeting in, the AI computer chip, the fuel that you put in that vehicle to get here, literally everything, the chairs that you're all sitting in, all of that starts with chemistry. And so that's why we like to say that American success relies on American chemistry.
Right. So now, as you heard there from the administrator, there were, when he was sworn in after Senate confirmation, hundreds of chemicals that were awaiting for in the backlog of approval. The previous administration let this all stack up. Can you explain for us, because we talked the other day about this, you were telling me the timeline that it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be like 2 90-day timelines on top of each other before they get, stacked on top of each other before they get to a thing. How did we get to this point where hundreds were in the backlog?
Yeah, so the Biden administration decided it needed to redo all of the work from the previous Trump administration, and so that's how that started. And the challenge they have is, as Administrator Zeldin said, is when they walked in the door, there's nearly 500 chemistries pending in the queue. And the challenge with all of that is you're supposed to do it in 90 days, and if you can't get that done, you get another 90 days. On average, it takes over a year. And our competitors in Europe and Asia, it takes them 3 to 6 months. So when you talk about innovation, when you talk about jobs, when you talk about inflation, you guys talked about that, it makes the cost of, we produce all of that overseas rather than here, it kills jobs, but it also makes everything more expensive. So it's just one small example of how the previous administration really struggled to implement a program that is vitally important to American manufacturing.
Right. So now, what are some of the things that are waiting, that were awaiting approval, still are? Like, can you kind of explain that for us? Like, what are, put it in real world terms. Is it like the plastic in the chair over here? Is it the stuff that goes on your car bumper? Is it like, I don't know. Like, what is it that's awaiting approval?
Yeah, it's all of it, right? So, for example, electric vehicle batteries. There's a chemical pending in the queue right now for over 5 years. I mean, it's preposterous. What also happens is our members choose to produce those chemistries somewhere else because of the timeline that they face. So if you talk about computer servers and AI chips, one of our members has invented a technology where you actually, believe it or not, you put the entire server in a fluid that will cool the chip. Well, that's going to be made overseas because they're not confident in EPA's ability to improve that anytime soon. So again, when we talk about innovation, when I talk about jobs, talk about the cost of living, there's huge costs if EPA cannot get this right. Now, in fairness, the EPA has inherited this problem. They're making progress and they're throwing more resources towards it, getting their computer systems right. So we're confident that we're going to continue to make progress going forward. But they got a huge job in front of them, and hopefully Congress can help them with that as well.
Yeah. So, from what I understand, there are potentially efforts in Congress to get things going again. Can you kind of give us some thoughts on that? Like, is there going to be movement on Capitol Hill? You heard the administrator there talk about potential permitting reform type of a thing, and this would probably be part of that. Is there legislation pending? Is it on the way? Where does that stand right now?
Yeah, so we had hoped that we'd have legislation already introduced, and then the government shutdown kind of got in the way of that. So literally it
got in the way of a lot of things.
Yeah,
so,
indeed, and hopefully that's coming to an end. But we expect on a bipartisan basis, hopefully, that we can get some legislation moving. Because there's wide recognition that permitting reform is desperately needed in a variety of areas. For us, it's this new chemicals program at EPA. Mm-hmm. So there is a deadline next year, not to get all inside the beltway into the details here, but there is a deadline that our members actually pay fees to get these chemicals reviewed, and they still don't get an answer. And so that authorization expires next year. So the Congress is going to have to do something to keep that money coming into EPA to review these chemicals. So we believe this is an opportunity to actually make that statute work more effectively and do that on a permanent basis. So we're optimistic about the ability to get that done.
Right. Okay. So now, speaking of semiconductors, right? Like, because I know that this is this is the thing everybody's talking about, is semiconductor chips, and right now a lot of them are made in Taiwan, if not all of them. And there's all this big focus here in the United States. We saw the previous administration, the CHIPS Act. Mm-hmm. From what I understand, we were talking about this the other day. You were telling me there's hundreds of different chemicals that just go into the production of one semiconductor chip. Can you explain that for us? How important and critical is the chemical industry to making a semiconductor chip?
Yeah, so maybe we'll do a little quiz of the audience, if that's okay.
Sure.
So how many different chemistries do you all think goes into a computer chip, the manufacture of a computer chip? I'll give you 3 numbers. All right, 500, 250, or 100. So raise your hand if you think it's 100 chemistries. All right, nobody. 250. All right, you guys, all right, Larry said 250. 500. All right, everybody in the room, you guys are really, really smart.
This is a smart audience, right?
Yeah.
Like our
Administrator Zeldin
audience
did say that. He said you were all smart.
This is the dialed-in crowd, right?
Dialed in, absolutely.
Yeah.
So believe it, it takes 500 specialty chemistries to manufacture one computer chip. So, what that means as we go forward and we transform our economy is that chemistry isn't just in a lab. It's helped make this stuff happen. And so if we don't get chemical policy right, believe it or not, we are not going to win the AI race against China. So again, that's why American success relies on American chemistry. If we get the policy to catch up with the technology, then we're going to be in a good place. Unfortunately, the Biden administration wanted to ban some of those chemistries. So again, we've got new leadership there, and we're headed in the right direction, and we're very optimistic about what the new EPA will bring us.
Right. So now one of the other things, so on the AI race with China, again, there's so many things that go into building out these various facilities, buildings, the equipment that they're going to use to build this stuff. And then also the actual stuff that they're building. I mean, and again, I keep going back to that opening question that we talked about there, which is that literally at the molecular level, everything has a chemistry connected to it, right? Like if you're going to make a plastic to do something, if you're going to have certain types of building materials, if you're going to have paint on the walls, if you're going to have all of these things, all are interconnected, if you will, into the whole thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if this Breitbart thing doesn't work out, you could come work with us because you got that exactly right.
So yeah, but Larry, are you listening? Right? Yeah.
But yes, so literally everything comes from our industry. Let's just take energy as one small piece of that, right? So without American chemistry, there is no American energy. And energy and chemistry have this kind of symbiotic relationship, right? So we take raw energy and we convert it, transform it into the products that power our economy. And so just a couple examples of that. So again, if you want to talk about the electricity that goes to data centers and the generation from natural gas to make that happen, or the crude oil that's uses chemicals then to be turned into gasoline that fuels your car, or battery technology so that we can store energy and use it later. So that's, if you think about everything that happens in the energy space and whatever your favorite form of energy is, chemistry stands behind it. And that's what's going to help fuel those data centers, which is going to drive AI going forward. And the demand for energy is going to go through the roof in this country. And we do not have the infrastructure, we do not have the policy environment, we do not have the transmission in order to make all that happen. We in the chemical industry stand ready to help make that go forward, but we need that policy environment to help us do it.
Right. Okay. So now another thing that the administrator mentioned during our conversation there was how the president and his policies are leading to the building of all these new places around the country, right? Like, and so even beyond just the AI stuff, we're seeing a lot of efforts to make stuff in America again and compete with China. Can you explain how the chemistry industry can help fuel that and be a big part of what the president is trying to do to make stuff in America?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, if we get these policy rights, we get more investment in the United States. Just if you look at our part of the world, just in terms of building a new chemical facility, is somewhere between hundreds of millions and billions of dollars of investment. And that's a 30, 40, 50-year asset that is going to be here for a long time, producing on behalf of all the manufacturing industries in this country. You talk about building construction as a subsector of the manufacturing economy, and everything we do, to your point about, for example, the insulation in your home, it keeps it cool in the summer and keeps it warm in the winter. That starts with chemistry. If you look at the opportunities for our industry to continue to grow and invest here, you've mentioned plastic several times. There's actually potential regulation pending at the EPA right now that would unlock billions of dollars of investment going forward in a technology called advanced recycling. So advanced recycling, what that does is that he mentioned it. He'd been to ExxonMobil in Baytown down in Texas, and he's seen that technology himself. And what it does is break down plastic, recycles it from its basic building blocks so you can make virgin quality material from that. So there are billions of dollars on the sidelines waiting for government policy to catch up. So there's tremendous growth opportunity for us to keep plastic out of the environment, to keep it out of landfills, and to create, if we recycled 50% of our plastic, you'd create another 175,000 jobs and $50 billion of economic output. So there's a lot of opportunity out there.
So another thing that you've heard from Administrator Zeldin, and this is something that I've noticed as a running theme as we've done this event series and we've talked to other members of the president's cabinet. We've got one coming up with the vice president in a couple weeks, a little under a couple weeks away. It's a week from Thursday for everybody out there, so we're super excited about that.
I will be here.
It'll be amazing. But one of the things he said was that they're working well across the administration. So, like, beyond just the EPA, he can work with Doug Burgum or other cabinet members, et cetera. He mentioned Howard Lutnick. Talk to us about how this administration as a whole is approaching things that affect you guys from a regulation perspective, and how it's different than what we've seen in the past.
So the right hand knows what the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. From a policy basis, which we did not see before. So you mentioned the Chips and Science Act. That's one quick example. We're trying to onshore the supply chain for making computer chips. At the same time, the Biden EPA was trying to ban the chemistries that make that possible. Totally crazy and made no sense. This administration doing a much better job. Take DOD, for example. So, everything that we do to deter our enemies, defend our country, and dominate as a country globally, from a DOD perspective, again, driven by chemistry. Think about aircraft that have specialized coatings for stealth, or think about the propellants that drive missile systems, or the lightweight fibers that are necessary for aircraft. Again, defending our country relies on American chemistry. And this administration has done a much better job of making sure, hey, we need to make sure we get these policies right so we can defend our country, so that we can grow American agriculture, so we can drive American energy dominance. And so I think this administration is very much on the right track as far as that goes.
So, in the last thing I'd ask you about here that I think is also extremely important, again, this is something that he mentioned, and we've heard other cabinet members, like we did an event earlier this year with Secretary Burgum, another one with Secretary Wright, focus on energy, but but more broadly than just the energy side of things, they're also focused on doing things in a clean way, right? Like environmentally clean. So can you talk to us a little bit about how the chemistry industry is approaching that, about how they're trying to also protect the environment and do this in a environmentally sound way?
Yeah. So I'd attack that from two angles. One, it's the products that we make that will help create a cleaner future, but it's also the way that we make them that will also do that as well. So just, kind of a couple of examples. I've talked about insulation already, but again, whether you talk about electric vehicles, hydrogen energy, nuclear energy, which has no emissions whatsoever, again, believe it or not, requires chemistry to do that. So what our products that our members make enable all of those clean technologies. At the same time, the way our members manufacture that has gotten better over time as well. So we've got a program that we call Responsible Care. Our members are required to comply with that program, and it is a third-party audit of our environmental, health, safety, and security protocols. And what we do is we gather their metrics, how they perform on those things. We aggregate that, and we publicly disclose that. Not because anybody in the government makes us do that, but because it's the right thing to do. And I can sit here and tell you that our industry is cleaner and safer than it has ever been. This is not your grandfather's chemical industry. And we're going to continue to get better and better as we go forward. So the way we do it's really important, and what we do is equally important.
Chris John from the American Chemistry Council, sir, really want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
All right, guys, stick around right now. Thank you, sir. Job well. I want to bring to the stage Breitbart's Finance and Economics Editor, John Carney, and EPA's Deputy Administrator, David. I blew it again. Fatui. David Fatui.
David, thanks so much.
Pleasure to be here.
You've worn a lot of hats over the past few years. You started in the private sector, you were acting general counsel at the EPA. Then when the bad guys came back into office, you were back in the private sector. Now you're back at the EPA. I wanted to just think about first, when you went back into private practice, based on the progress you guys had made at the EPA the first time, how had the practice changed? And someday we may not be in charge of the EPA again. How do you think it will be different when you guys have accomplished all you're looking to accomplish?
Well, great question, and really a pleasure to be with all of you today. You're right. I've had a lot of private sector experience, and this is my second go-around at EPA. We accomplished a lot in the first term. We accomplished a lot in terms of deregulation, but we also accomplished a lot in terms of environmental outcomes. We had fewer areas designated for non-attainment at the end of our first term than at the beginning. We had fewer waters across the country that were impaired under our water quality standards program at the end of our first term than at the beginning. And the list kind of sort of goes on from there. So we sort of proved in that first term of the president's time in office that you can accomplish both deregulation and right-sizing regulatory regimes while also obtaining environmental outcomes that benefit the American people. When I went back into the private sector, I saw that the Biden administration had regressed and reverted to a process where enforcement actions were heavy-handed and not focused as much on obtaining compliance, but rather were more punitive in nature. I saw an attempt to impose additional regulatory costs on industry that were not well focused and tied to obtaining environmental outcomes. And I saw an attempt to sort of repeal regulatory accomplishments that were obtained in the first term just simply because they were associated with President Trump.
Right.
And not because they were, that they needed to be revisited. I'll just use one example. In the first term, we created a portal to post all EPA guidance documents so that the public, regulated community, NGOs, everyone could see how EPA was interpreting statutes and regulations and how that would be applied to the regulated community. And we posted all EPA guidance to that portal. The Biden administration took it down. Really,
That's
it was
mind-blowing.
a pure transparency initiative removed from public view. So we've restored that and updated it in the first few months of my time back at the agency since June. But that's just one example. And so in the private sector, I had that sort of unique perspective of being able to, of working with the regulated community who want to come into compliance, who are not out to put their employees or their communities at risk. It's rather the opposite. And so being able to take that experience and bring it back to EPA and finding ways where we can work with the regulated community to achieve compliance and to right-size our regulations so that they can be applied in a way where we're actually achieving results is something that I'm prioritizing in my second go-around here.
And I know this is a tough question, but you just talked about the problem of Trump comes in, we get a lot done in the first term. Biden comes in and starts to just tear down all of the progress we made. And I don't know, from a regulatory point of view, is there anything or is this just really a matter of legislation that we can do to try to avoid this cycle repeating itself again?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think certainly legislation always helps. And as an agency, we're always sort of going to follow the letter of the law when it comes to our statutory authorities. But we are now in a position sitting here today in 2025 where the Supreme Court has issued a number of decisions, including the Loper-Bright case from a couple of years ago, overturning the Chevron doctrine, as well as other decisions about when the agency must consider costs and benefits, and the list goes on. Where we are now in a position of being able to look back at the regulatory landscape that's built up over decades in some cases to determine, is this fit for purpose? Does this regulatory regime work? And most importantly, is it consistent with the best reading of the Clean Air Act or of the Clean Water Act or of the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act? And if it's not, then we have an obligation to propose a new regulation consistent with that interpretation that's the best reading of the statute. And under Loper-Bright, the court will, if the court agrees with the agency, then that is the definition that will proceed, and that is going to be less sort of vulnerable to those pendulums swinging back and forth.
You already anticipated my next question, which is the end of Chevron deference at Loper-Bright. So we're on the same page here.
You didn't show me that before.
No, we did not rehearse that. But I wanted to talk about how has that changed how you look at rulemaking and regulation now that in some ways, I guess it does give you more confidence that if you are reading the statute correctly, somebody else will not be able to come in and say, well, they're going to defer to me now, and I'm going to read it in a wild way.
I think that's right. We certainly have to and I think that we've set the tone from the top at the agency that we must comply with our statutory obligations and we must stay within the four corners of the statutes that Congress has given to us to administer. There's no sort of additional authority that EPA has outside of its statutory authority, and we're not going to start reading our statutes creatively such that it eviscerates the limits that Congress has put on the agency. So that has to be the starting point. And when it comes to determining what the best reading of the statute is, we're going to stick with not just the text that Congress provided, although that is absolutely the hallmark, but we're going to look at sort of what are we trying to accomplish for the American people. And this gets back to what the administrator typically says, which is our goal is to protect human health and the environment, which it undoubtedly is, and we can accomplish that while growing the economy and fostering private sector economic growth and reducing the cost of living. And so when we're looking at our regulatory obligations that have built up, we're looking through the lens of our statutory authority and determining what are the outer bounds of what we can do, and is it the case that we need to revisit a regulatory regime that's built up over decades.
You guys have talked about priorities for the agency. Obviously, clean air, water, land. But some of the others, I think, are newer. Energy dominance. So I wanted energy dominance, permitting reform, making sure that the U.S. can be the AI capital of the world, and protecting particularly the auto industry, which has been under assault. But I think broader manufacturing, if we are going to revive manufacturing in the U.S., we need to have reform. I hear from people who really want to be able to build in the U.S., and they say the environmental, that it will take them a decade to even start, which means they can't get investment to do it because they're locked down. So I just wanted to kind of go through this list, maybe start with the last one, the manufacturing in American autos, and how you guys look at each of these priorities and how regulation can help achieve these priorities instead of standing in the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a hallmark of the president and the administrator to prioritize the return of manufacturing jobs to this country. We know that when it comes to either energy development or manufacturing, that we do it best here and we do it the most responsibly here than other countries abroad. And so fostering a regulatory landscape that ensures that those investments are happening here is a top priority. So our job is to carry out our statutory obligations and protect human health and the environment, but there is a way to do that effectively, as we showed in the first term and as we're showing again now, where we are not a roadblock, but in fact actually assisting with that investment and domestic increase in manufacturing capacity here. So take the auto industry for example. We have proposed to rescind the greenhouse gas regulations on motor vehicles and engines based on our proposal that, if finalized, would rescind the 2009 endangerment finding for greenhouse gases. Our view is that that the agency previously exceeded its legal authority, and if we finalize that rule as proposed, it would result in the rescission of those requirements. Our view is that if that is finalized, it would save the economy billions of dollars and put consumers back in the driver's seat of selecting the vehicles that they want to buy. And so that is just one example, but we're looking at the regulatory landscape across the agency and figuring out, is this the right way to approach the problems that we're all trying to solve, and what costs is this existing approach having on our economic growth?
A lot of people would be surprised to hear that there's a role for AI from the EPA. So I was hoping you could discuss how you guys are looking at that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's sort of an inward and outward look. So Externally, we all know that data centers that will power the AI revolution, that the president's been very clear that the United States must win, it's not optional, require significant baseload power and significant amounts of water. So through our regulatory actions, we're looking for ways to improve the ability for the electric power generating sector to invest in baseload power and improve grid reliability. We're also looking for ways where there can be opportunities for water reuse, so that facilities that are using large amounts of water for cooling have opportunities to reuse existing water streams without necessarily having to deplete groundwater sources. So we're working on an update to our water reuse action plan to provide that type of flexibility in that regard. We're looking internally as well. We understand that harnessing AI can help improve how the agency processes large amounts of information, how we go about our permitting, and so we're doing that in a very careful way. We're not just sort of rolling anything out before we've proven the concept, but we are looking for opportunities, and we're working with our state partners. Some states and their environment departments are out ahead of the federal government in terms of utilizing AI for permitting and for reviewing actions that they are working on. So we're looking for ways to harness that internally at EPA to sort of be a force multiplier for the staff that we have working every day.
On energy dominance, we've gone from an administration that really seemed to think that their job was to hold back the development of energy, and it's been very hard to build pipelines in the U.S. So what steps are you guys taking to move us to a place of energy dominance?
Yeah, it's really an across-the-board effort that cuts across all of our different offices: air, water, waste, chemicals. We're looking for ways to streamline the permitting process across the board. Many of our permitting programs are implemented by states through delegated authority. We are looking for ways to authorize more states to take on EPA's permitting authority and enforcement authority. We've recently approved North Dakota's plan to take over regulating coal combustion residuals. We've approved states to take over underground injection control programs, and we're interested in working with states on other delegated and assumed programs as well to put them more in the driver's seat of implementing those permitting programs. But separately from that, like I said, we're looking across our regulatory portfolio, and we've highlighted rules that affect electric generating, domestic oil and gas production, and to your point, pipelines and other projects. Well, I'll highlight one rule in particular. The Clean Water Act has a section 401, that requires states and tribes to provide a water quality certification for any project that requires a federal license or permit. So think hydroelectric dams, export terminals, coal export terminals, pipelines, natural gas pipelines. We revised the rules of the road for that program in 2020. After 50 years, that regulatory regime had built up and had not been changed materially in 50 years and had been weaponized by certain states, Washington, New York, to block projects.
Right.
And because the statute talks about how the federal agency cannot issue the federal license or permit without this certification, those states were withholding the certification as a way to block that, FERC license or Army Corps of Engineers permit. The Biden administration rolled back our reforms and actually made the program even worse. And so we have taken steps to develop a new proposal to revise that program. It's over at the White House for interagency review, which is sort of the last step before that proposal is issued to the public for comment. But that's just one example where we're looking at our authorities, seeing how they've been implemented, and then coming up with a way where we are balancing the state's role in that process with the federal interest in ensuring that projects like pipelines are built expeditiously.
I live in New England, and we're being held hostage by New York by its attempt to refuse to allow energy to cross that state with a pipeline. So while we talk about getting states more involved, sometimes I worry some of these states, as you said, are being obstructionist.
Well, Congress in Section 401 of the Clean Water Act gave states a role, but it did not give states this blanket sort of veto authority
Right.
to block projects based on any reason that they could possibly think of. It's very focused on water quality, and it's very focused on the discharges to a water of the United States, and that's what the authority that the state has to condition a federal license or permit. It's very targeted authority, and it's something that we're trying to restore, being respectful of the state's ability to protect its own water quality while still staying within the four corners of what Congress had laid out in the statute and preventing it from being abused in the way it has been by states like New York.
I know Matt brought this up earlier, but I think there's a huge connection between deregulating energy in particular and bringing down inflation and affordability. Energy touches everything we buy, and when it becomes cheaper, that will just almost mechanically bring down inflation because it is a big part of the inflation index. But also, it will then feed into all the other products. How is the EPA thinking about the affordability agenda and what it can do to, solve this problem that still vexes a lot of Americans?
Yeah, absolutely. The Biden administration imposed a significant amount of additional regulatory burden on energy generation, whether it's extraction, oil and gas, whether it's electric generation, through a slew of additional regulatory requirements, some of which had little to no tie to actual environmental or health outcomes. I'll use the updates that the Biden administration made to the mercury and air toxic standard as an example. We've proposed in the last few months to rescind those updates and to revert back to the rule as it existed in 2020, which the Biden administration agreed fully protects against the health impacts of mercury and other air toxics. But they decided, simply because they determined there was additional technology available to reduce emissions by a larger degree, that those would now be required. And that imposed a significant amount of additional cost on electric generation at a time when we need more baseload power, when AI data centers are going to ask the grid to send them more power. And as a result, the risk is that consumers' electric bills go up. And so that is just one action that we've proposed. But the target of all of what we're trying to do is address the cost of living for Americans so that, as you said, energy feeds into costs for so many other goods and services that are purchased. So even if it's not the consumer's direct electric bill, it's the cost of the good or service that they're buying that's influenced by that. It's the cost of the haircut that they're purchasing from the barbershop
Right.
down the street, whatever it is, right? So that is a focus of ours in conjunction with carrying out our statutory obligation.
David, this has been really helpful. You began by saying how the Biden administration made this mind-blowing anti-transparency move, bringing down the portal. And I wanted to say thank you for putting it back up. I think it's important for anybody who's an entrepreneur in the United States to be able to look to see how you guys are actually interpreting the rules. Why did they take it down?
The press release that they issued, my recollection of it was a little bit sort of like Alice in Wonderland. They said it would actually improve transparency and reduce confusion. It obviously does the opposite when you take down from public view reams of guidance documents that are directly applicable to the regulated community and individuals across the country. So we're looking for other opportunities to do similar things to improve transparency. The president has made clear that the entire administration is going to act in a transparent fashion. We've been doing that by going through the rulemaking process for all of our major actions. We're going to be doing it on things like the guidance portal as well.
Thank you. I think this in itself is a bit of transparency improvement showing up at our Breitbart event. So thank you very much for coming today. This has been a terrific conversation.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I just wanted to do a little advertisement. You'll find Breitbart Business Digest card on your seat. It's a free newsletter, and we will be talking about this conversation in the digest. So please subscribe. It comes to your email box every day. Thank you. Thank you.